Good morning, everybody. Olivia and I are back. We're going to be doing 100% whole grain bread today. I have been making this for years and years and years. I think probably figured about 35, not quite 40, but 35. I grind my own grain and it makes 5 loaves. Now, the problem with this video is you may not be interested in it at all because it does take special equipment. I grind my grain, so I have a wheat grinder and I have a Bosch Universal that will knead, K-N-E-A-D, for me 5 loaves at a time, and probably a little bit more, but I do 5 loaves at a time. So you may not be interested. You may kind of think that, wow, she's really selling these products. I'm not. I have no affiliation with them at all, but when I find something I love and when I find something that has worked for me for years and years and years, or even a new product that I just love, I mean, I'm theirs forever and they're mine forever. And that's kind of the way it is with the wheat grinder and the Bosch Universal. Bread is super simple. It's a very healthy. It's a complex carbohydrate or a complex starch. We eat it all the time. My kids, when they were growing up, didn't really appreciate it, but now they do, and I'm still making it. You can make this recipe, and you can make just regular bread. You can make your own hamburger buns, hot dog buns. You can make cinnamon raisin loaves of bread, or one of our favorite things, or the kids' favorite thing, is cinnamon rolls, which we frequently do. So they're 100% whole grain cinnamon rolls. So we're going to get started. The ingredients are so simple, and you're going to find, I think, it amazing that so much can come of so few ingredients. I have my grain here. I'm going to show you in a few minutes the different grains I use. There's 3 different types of grain. Warm water, very warm water. You know the difference between warm and hot. There's just a little sting to hot and a very pleasant feeling with warm. I use nice warm water. It's right between warm and hot. I use yeast. The only yeast I've ever used and would only recommend is called SAF Instant Yeast. I can get that even right now online from Amazon. I usually get, this is a 1-pound package. I usually get it in a bundle of 2 packages. It's cheaper that way. I have one. I usually give Olivia one. It's vacuum sealed, so that when you just break the seal at all, it goes shh and expands a little bit, so it's super fresh. It stays really fresh. I take it out of here and I put it into a container with an airtight lid, and I put it in the freezer like this. It dissolves so easily. I've never had a bad batch of yeast. It keeps for quite a while. I noticed on this that it expires in December of 21. It'll be long gone before that. But because I keep it in the freezer, it would keep longer than that. So even if you don't use yeast as much as I do, this is probably still a really good buy. It has honey in it and oil and salt. I just use regular table salt. I think you could use anything, but if you use any different size of salt, yes, it will still dissolve, but I know the saltiness now. It's 2 tablespoons of table salt. If you use a larger grain salt, it won't be quite as salty. Now, also I want you to remember that I said 5 loaves of bread. So 2 tablespoons of salt for 5 loaves of bread, not much. 2/3 of a cup of oil, not much when you're talking about 5. And these are large loaves, and 2/3 cup honey. So I think that's it for the ingredients. Okay, Olivia just noticed when we're standing here by the Bosch, she said, it's old. It is old. I've had it for as long as I've been baking bread, and it's still working. Would I like a new bowl? Yeah, probably, but this still works really well. So I put the 6 cups of very warm water in, and then I'm going to sprinkle the 2 tablespoons of yeast over the top of the water. This is the bowl of the Bosch Universal, and it is the bread bread hook. I can't remember now all of a sudden what it is. I think it's a bread hook. 2 tablespoons of salt. It is not true that yeast is killed by salt. It's not true. So I put my salt right in there at the same time. This is the 2/3 of a cup of oil, and this is another trick. If you're using oil and then you're using honey, put the oil in first, then the honey. It's the same amount, 2/3 of a cup of each. I get this honey at Sam's. I get, probably the cheapest thing I can. If we're eating honey, I try to use local honey, but not for the bread. So then it just comes right out. Look at that. And let me tell you something, it doesn't do it quite like that if you don't have oil in your cup first. All of the ingredients are in here except for the flour, but I want to mix it really well, and I want to leave it in this beautiful warm water, and the yeast is going to dissolve perfectly here while I'm getting the grain ground. So I'm going to mix it. And there I'll leave it. Okay, now we're going to talk about the grain. I use 3 kinds of grain. Initially when I started doing this, I really only knew about 1 kind of grain, and it was hard red winter or hard red spring, whatever you can get. Now I have moved on. I always do hard red winter or hard red spring. I make sure that it's organic. I'm not big into everything organic, but it is important to me, I think, when we make this bread. The other grains I use are kamut and spelt. They are both ancient grains. The reason I have these now, and I don't make bread just with these, is because they are both ancient grains. They are both very high in protein and low in gluten. So if I was to make bread with just spelt and kamut, either one or both, I would not get a good rise. I would not have a real good crumb, which is the rise and the bubbles that you can see, because it's so heavy and that it wouldn't allow it to, the lack of gluten just wouldn't allow it to have a beautiful, beautiful rise and crumb to it. So I usually keep these in the garage, but there's no need for you to visit my garage. So what I usually do is I take my 2 gallons out and I go back and forth, and I go one from the hard winter or hard spring, and then I do another cup. This is a mixture of kamut and spelt, so it's really 1 to 1, but I have mixed the kamut and spelt together. So I go back and forth until I have 11 cups of grain, and that's what I have now. All right, this is my grain mill. It's a NutriMill by Liqui. If you're interested, this is the top where you put the grain. I do my grains in there. I also do popcorn in there to make cornmeal. It makes awesome fresh cornbread. I have a great recipe for something called Swedish orange rye bread. So I grind my own rye berries in here. It's a pretty handy machine to have because I use it all the time. So I'm going to pour the grains into the top. It'll take all 11 cups. There's a little bit of static electricity always, so I make sure that I get all the grain and I just kind of flatten it out. So there we have the grain. I put this lid on. I don't really know why you put the lid on because nothing really happens, nothing flies out. And then this is where the grain will come, right down in here. And it's very loud, so we're going to turn the video off now and grind the grain, and by the magic of an iPhone, the next time you see us, it will be all ground. Okay, we're about to see what 11 cups of wheat berries looks like. Here we go. It's beautiful, fine. It's very fine. Oh, and it's nice and warm. I wanted to tell you that this is 100% whole grain, and it's hard to make 100% whole grain bread without being able to grind your own wheat berries. Through one of God's miracles, the wheat berry left uncompromised, left unbroken, uncrushed, and certainly milled, will hold its nutritive value for centuries. Yep, centuries. But as soon as it's compromised, the germ starts to deteriorate and it goes rancid very quickly. So a lot of the whole wheat flour that you find in grocery stores it can't possibly be freshly ground. Once in a while you'll find a health food store where they have a grinder and you can do that. But so the whole wheat flour that you find in grocery stores, they've normally taken the germ out, which is a lot of the nutritive value of the flour, and also it has had a chance to compact and compact and compact. So this is light and freshly ground, still warm. That is my rule, actually, of making bread, is the grain, the flour, has to still be warm from the grinder, and then I start making my bread while the flour is still warm. And I think that's all. And the next thing we're going to do is go over and start adding this to our yeast and water and honey and salt mixture. Okay, now we have this yeast that is definitely dissolved in the liquids. It's ready to go. We have a picture for you that you can see that it's activated. And now I'm going to add 5 cups of this flour at a time. By the way, 11 cups of grain makes at least 15 cups of flour. So I'm just going to add that. And then after each addition of the 5 cups of flour, that might have been 6, I don't know if I lost track or not. And I put the lid on because flour seems to go everywhere. And then I'm just going to like pulse this until it's really mixed well. I can take this lid off. Now, after each addition of 5, I let it completely get to be a homogeneous mixture again. I see some flour on the sides, but this mixture is completely mixed, and I do that after each addition. And I do this until, you're going to find this pretty odd, but I do this until the sides of the Bosch, the insides, are completely clean. And I don't mean a little bit cleaner or almost clean. I mean completely clean. And you're going to see what I mean. Okay, and again, another addition. I'm just going to keep doing this, and the next time you see this, it's going to be clean on the sides. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay, this is now ready for its 10 minutes of kneading. And Olivia is going to show you that, see how clean the edges. I mean, it looks like I took it to the sink and washed it. That's a bunch of dough, but this Bosch handles it without even bogging down or slowing down at all. So now I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to let it go knead for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And no, if I wanted the absolute joy of kneading my own bread, I could do this. I could take it out right now and I could knead it for 10 minutes. But I know how to knead, and I'll maybe do a little bit of kneading when this is finished just to show you sort of the technique of it. But I just let my Bosch do it. All right, here we go. 10 full minutes. I'll see you back then. Okay, here we have 5 loaves worth of well-developed dough. The gluten is very, very, very well developed in this bread now. I do not add any flour. Let's see, how do I say this? When I add the last flour and it's clean around the edges, I don't add any more flour at all. And then I set the timer for 10 minutes because it takes 10 minutes for gluten to fully develop. And that's what I wanted. So I've got a mat here. Sometimes I do it on my counter. I thought you might think it'd be pretty gross. So I have a mat here. It has some oil here. Again, I said I don't add any more flour. I don't need in my flour. We have a pretty clean bowl. And of course, my little fried brain has remembered now that this is a dough hook. It's like I don't know what I'm doing, but I really do. It's just the flusteredness of being filmed, I think. You can see how stretchy this dough is. And I just clean off the dough hook really well. Comes off pretty easily. I think it doesn't stick. It just comes off pretty cleanly, I think. And then I put this dough hook back in here and I take it to the sink and I run super hot water in there and put a little Dawn in it, and that's all. Okay, so here's where I get the joy of kneading. It is not sticky at all. It's very elastic. I don't usually do this, but I can pull some apart. There we go. I always think this is like the perfect way bread should feel. And the thing about the coming clean, that's pretty much true about all breads you'll make. You'll know when you've reached enough flour by how clean your hands are, or the surface that you're kneading on gets. That's when you know when you've got enough flour, because flour is kind of a little bit deceptive. The amount of flour is a little deceptive depending on the humidity or even the temperature in your home. But here we have a beautiful mound of dough. While the bread was kneading, I went ahead and I used Pam to spray 5 bread pans. If I was going to make anything else, of course I would use other equipment, but you can tell my bread pans are old. I never wash them. They're well seasoned. The bread usually, just pops right out easily, but I do spray a little Pam. And the next thing, here we've got this beautiful loaf, and I do weigh my loaves, so I know from experience that they're going to be about 800 grams, but I go ahead and I weigh them. I'll tear my little scale out. It's on grams because grams are so much easier to be accurate with. And then I add this all up and then divide it by 5. Okay, so just from experience, like I said, I know they're about 800, and sure enough, they're right on the money, 800. So now I use my trusty bench scraper. By the way, this is one of my favorite kitchen tools, is a bench scraper. I use it to cut my bread. I use it to scoop things off of the counter and put it someplace else. Anyway, one of my favorite things. I use it every day. Okay, and I make sure it's right at 800. $7.98, 800. All right, and then I take this out, and I'm going to, there are a couple of different ways to do this. So I re-knead it, making sure that it's just one big blob mixture. I knead it a little bit to make sure that there aren't going to be air holes in it. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can do this. I'm going to show you this one. You can kind of pull it out a little bit, and then you can roll it very tightly, making sure, again, no air bubbles at all. Shape it into a loaf, pull the ends over. And there it goes. On our very last 800 gram loaf of bread. And the other way that I do it, and this is how I do it most of the time, is I just knead it into a loaf shape. I pull it in and push. It's coming to a loaf shape now, and then I just roll it over and add it to the last pan. All right. You're probably saying, wait, she's putting these into the oven way too quickly. They haven't even risen yet. No, I'm not. I am putting them into the oven because it is a draft-free, warm environment. I just put the light on. I only put the light on. No other temperature at all, but it's a nice, sweet, draft-free environment for these to rise. And then I have put this is damp. It's just a towel, a 100% cotton towel. I don't think that matters, but I put that over there so the tops don't dry at all. And we're gonna set, it's 12:07 right now, so I'm gonna tell you exactly how long. The other thing I want to talk about is if you make bread, or if you've made bread at all, you're probably saying, no, wait, bread always has to have 2 rises. Not so with this bread, and that is the other amazing thing about making your own bread from your own freshly ground wheat. It only takes 1 rise, just 1 rise. And the reason you have to have more rises in other bread is because it is harder to get the gluten to develop in older flour. This is just so fresh. It's just really easy. And I know in videoing this, it's going to look like it's a pretty quick procedure. We're going to cut and paste, or Olivia's going to do that. She's so good at that. But it really doesn't take very long. It's not a huge hands-on experience. It does take a little bit for this to rise, but it'll only take about an hour for this to rise. And then I bake it for 30 minutes at 350. But we'll come back when they're ready to go into the oven, into the heated oven. So we have a beautiful rise on this bit, on all the 5 loaves, and now the oven is preheating to 350 degrees, and we're going to put it in. I wanted to show you how you can tell if your bread has enough rise on it. If it doesn't, when you poke it, it'll come back up. Poke it, come back up. But when it has risen enough, you poke it a little bit, and the indentation stays, and it just stayed right there. So this is ready to bake. All right, here comes the bread out of the oven. It baked for 30 minutes at 350. I will tell you that Olivia and I got a little bit distracted fixing lunch for 7 people. So we probably did let this rise just a little bit too much, but it'll still be wonderfully fine. Now I wait on this until it is completely cool. Like when I tip it over, I can't handle it now, it's too hot, but when I tip it over and there's not even any warmth on the bottom at all, and then I put it in bread bags, seal it, and then I put 2 in bread bags and then into a 2-gallon Ziploc baggie and almost immediately into the freezer, or I give it away, which I do a lot of giving it away too. The first couple of days, like today, tomorrow, and maybe the day after that, it's really good for sandwiches. After that, remember, it has no preservatives whatsoever in it. So after that, it's really only good for toast, but it makes amazing toast, or grilled cheese sandwiches, BLTs, anything that you would toast. Anyway, so there we have it. We'll get this posted, and if you have any questions, ask away, and we'll try to answer them. Thank you.